So I've taken all the pieces of the DIY kit out and laid them out how they all fit together, and I'm trying to decide and figure out what the best way to proceed is and what I need to do next. As you can see, it's, you know, goes together like that. There's another thing over on that side. So when I make a decision, I'll come back. I've decided the best way to proceed is to start making stuff stick together. So I'm gonna make it all stick together, just sort of tack it in place so I can hold it up to the Jeep and make sure everything fits, and then I gotta figure out what I need to cut off of the front of the Jeep down under over there. So let's make some metal stick together. We're looking at the passenger side of the Jeep, and I could see what they want you to cut now. This bracket is supposed to sit on there flush, and it doesn't with all this metal here. So you have to take and chop this out all the way over here, chop it out right there, hammer this flat, and that should fit on there nice and flush like. Same thing, just slightly different angle. If you're familiar with the front of a Cherokee, you know what this is. It is a cross member for the front of the unibody frame rail. So I have to chop all that stuff out of there. Alrighty then, to bring you back up to speed, I have it all tacked in place. It is all ready to go, and I have made the nut strips that go into the unibody frame rails of the Jeep. That one's still pretty warm. And as for under here, I had to cut a lot of this off. I left a lot of it intact. It looked like the instructions want you to just pretty much cut the entire thing out. I elected to cut a little strip off like that all the way along the edge to leave it intact. So I think I'm going to get set up to do some welding back on that mount over there, and then I'll throw a coat of primer and paint on this so it doesn't rust, and we'll continue on. Okay, it's the next day now, and I'm on my back looking up at the steering box brace mounted or mocked up in its position. And the reason that I have it marked up is because I have to drill the frontmost holes, or hole on both sides. There's two. This hole lines up with a hole that's already in the unibody frame rail on both sides. This one, however, I have to adjust a hair. We'll end up grinding away a bit of the unibody frame rail in there so it lines up. But I have to mark this hole, and the same on the other side, drill it out, and then I'll be able to get the nut certs that I made into there, and I'll be able to bolt it down permanently. Of course, after painting this. The welds came out good, so I don't have to do anything weird there. Same thing on the other side. I'm just going to clean up some of the weld slag and take some of the mill scale off. Some of the, like this piece is mill scaled. This is pretty clean. It's kind of oily. I'll have to take that off and paint it and yeah, install it. And then if you're wondering, the pillow block bearing goes on right there, like so. And that's what supports the steering box brace with this kit, along with stiffening the front of the unibody frame more than my front bumper already does. But yeah, that's sort of the point of this kit, is to stiffen the front of the vehicle up and support the steering box. Alrighty then, I have my steering box brace all painted and it's drying right now. I'm about to move it inside, and welds came out pretty good. It's almost like I know what I'm doing, right? But it's painted there. Moving underneath the Jeep, I touched up all of the spots. I touched up all of the spots and stuff and cleaned up my unibody frame rails. I drilled the two holes in the front. There's this one, and then there's this one right here. I also had to waller out this hole, or oblong it rather, because it didn't quite line up like it was supposed to, so I had oblong that out a bit. So I think once the paint's dry, we're ready to install it. So we'll just wait for that and move on. Alright, it is the next day now, and I have all of my parts and pieces laid out on the table. I've read all the instructions to make sure I didn't forget anything, and am sure of what I'm doing. First step, or well, you know, first step for this morning rather, after laying everything out here, is to take the brace, fit it up onto the Jeep, make sure that my pitman arm, or the new pitman arm's nut, is centered in this hole, and then to take these bolts right here and throw them up into the back holes. Since on the Jeep there's already nut certs in that section of the frame for where the sway bar was mounted. So those bolts thread up right in there, and I'm going to put some rust-proof grease on those so I don't run into any issues with them seizing in there, being that I live in New England. The weather is my Loctite, so anti-seize grease or rust-proof grease it is. Now I had already fit this off several times yesterday, so I know I shouldn't have any issues. Should be good to go. It's all about doing a three-handed job with two, honestly. I'm leaving them loose on purpose because I need to shift the brace all around to get it centered on this and make sure all my holes are lined up. This one bolt gives me trouble because the threads on the nuts are in there are fairly dirty and a bit messed up. It's not cross-threaded, it just, the threads are just messed up enough to give me problems. But with a little extra persuasion of a wrench, it goes in there no problem. Or looking back up at it from under the Jeep, I have everything lined up. These holes line up like I had planned. Same thing on the other side. I just have to double check that this is centered in the hole there again. And then the next thing I have to do is feed the nut certs in through the front of the frame and feed the bolts that go into that on both sides in there. And in the instructions, they say to possibly remove the front bumper, and I believe that would be if you had a factory bumper. I have an aftermarket bumper and leaves a lot of space in here. I mean, you can get your whole hand up in there pretty easily. So I have full access to the front of the unibody frame up over here. So I already tested it. I have no issues feeding the nut certs in there, so this bumper can stay. I don't have to remove it, which is a good thing because it's a bit of a pain in the ass. It's kind of heavy. It's, you know, it's all 3/16 steel. So we'll do that and check back later. It's all stuff that you've seen before if you're watching this video. Alright, I have everything torqued down. I have actually already gone for a test drive to test everything out. And I'm actually really surprised at how much of a difference this actually made. Right now there is zero play in the steering at all. Everything is rock solid. Probably a lot better than it was from the factory. The only thing I could do is add a steering stabilizer setup over here somewhere, but I'm trying to avoid that because I don't really need it. But this actually made quite a bit of difference in terms of how the steering felt. There's zero play, everything is rock solid. This is actually a pretty nice kit. So, the only thing left to do is, of course, straighten the steering wheel. And like I said, I have no adjustment here, so it's going to have to be on the steering wheel itself. Oh crap, where did it go? Oh, that's better. Right in here in front of the rear wheel in the wheel well, I have a bit of rot right here. So I have to cut it out and put some non-rotted metal back in there and yeah, take care of that problem. So first thing I have to do is, of course, remove my wheel and tire. So, I mean, if you're watching this video, you know how this goes. I'll check that. Well, this is what living in New England will do to you. The first thing I was doing was just poking around to see how much of this inner wheel well area I was going to have to chop away. Just to get a sense of how thin the metal is and where. So it looks like right along the seam is where I'll stop there, but I'll cut everything out here, and then I'll probably make a cut along here and then go down over here somewhere. I shined a flashlight in there. The inside of this cavity here, on top of this rock slider, is actually all very clean in there because I did coat the inside of it with the interior chassis paint from Eastwood. And then before the end of last year, I had sprayed fluid film in this and any other open cavity and whatnot. So it's actually all very clean in here. Just this last bit over here is just rotted out. Which, when I built these rock sliders, I knew that this metal was pretty thin up in here, and there was a spot on the other side under the rear door here that I also had to fix. So I knew eventually I was going to have to do this, just didn't know exactly when. Well, now. So, I'm going to go get my cutting discs and stuff set up, and we'll do some cutting. So this is the hole I've left myself. I made the edges all fairly clean. I'm going to touch up a couple of the corners still, but this edge I had to clean up quite a bit. And that's because of how I welded this sheet metal on the fender well to my rock rail before. But it's clean now, and I'm just going to go dig through my sheet metal pieces and find the one that's the right thickness and just cut out one that'll fit in this area-ish. And I'm going to go to this on the inside seam and butt it right up against the inside seam all the way down and weld to this to sort of tie this back into this down on the bottom. And then I'm probably going to lap over the rest of this and probably do some holes and make spot welds all along this and seal it back up. So, I'm just going to find a piece of metal. Okay, I had dug around through my scrap metal collection and found a piece of 16th inch sheet metal, and so I of course made it fit, and I drilled some holes in it to make some spot style welds. So the next thing I'm going to do is wipe this down and everything around here and inside here a bit down with some brake clean or some milling spirits, whatever solvent I can find. And then I'm gonna shoot some primer down in here to coat the inside of this right now, so to hold back anything else from happening. And then I'm gonna get the weld through primer and paint the back side of this with the weld through primer, stick it in there and whatnot, weld it up solid. And then before, I had drilled a hole way down here in this bottom section, I think towards the inside here, for any water that gets in there to have a path out, and so that I can get my fluid film nozzle in there and spray it, and I can also fit the Eastwood chassis, interior chassis coating hose all the way in there. So I'll have to get another can of the Eastwood stuff so I could recoat everything inside of here, and I'll probably do the entire both sides of these again, and then I'll shoot some fluid film back in there and whatnot to make it all nice and pretty again. Alright, she ain't pretty, but she's in there. This metal is really thin. Like, I think it's probably like 22 or 23 or 24 gauge, something stupid thing like that, and I've got 16-inch thick metal that I'm trying to weld it to. So it was just a mess up in here. And then this, I was able to sort of get a seam here, and then turns out that there's a bit of a mess right here as well that I'm going to have to cut out and put a little patch in that I ended up finding by blowing nice holes in it. So I guess I will cut out something right here and put another piece of metal in there. I'm going to leave this little crack right here as a crack so I can get a drill bit in there and drill a hole in there for myself easily. But I'm going to cut this shit out right here, make my little patch to put it together. What a bitch. Alright, so that wraps this project up. I got one patch and two patch. Now there's no rot in that corner until it develops somewhere else. You know, it's a never-ending battle. So it is what it is. It's cheap as used and abused. So, got get that all fixed up. Of course, because I was welding 2 interior pieces, my welding melted the interior coating off, so I touched that up with some shit. So I just have to put my back seat back in, put the rear tire back on there, and we'll be good to go. So that'll be it for this video. Be sure to like the video, leave me a comment if you're a returning member, let me know. Subscribe, of course, and like our Facebook page. The link is in the description. And as always, get out there and do something.